The room went silent the second my daughter-in-law raised her glass and called me a useless old man living off their success. Everyone laughed except my son. He just stared at the floor. What none of them knew was that the house they were celebrating in had been bought entirely with my money. And by the end of that night, everything would change. My name is Richard Hale. I'm 68 years old, retired now, but for 34 years I worked as a financial fraud investigator for the State Attorney General's office. Most people think that job is about numbers. It isn't. It's about people. Greed leaves fingerprints everywhere if you know where to look. I spent most of my life uncovering lies hidden behind polished smiles and expensive suits. I learned early that betrayal rarely arrives screaming. It walks quietly into your life wearing familiarity. After retirement, my life slowed down. My wife, Eleanor, had passed away from breast cancer 6 years earlier. Losing her changed the rhythm of my days. The house became quieter. Breakfast tasted different. Even sunlight felt colder somehow. My son Daniel tried to stay close after her death. He called often at first, visited on weekends, brought groceries I didn't ask for. I appreciated the effort because grief can make even strong men disappear into themselves. Daniel was 42, an architect with talent but very little patience. He always wanted success quickly. Eleanor used to say he inherited my ambition and her stubbornness. Unfortunately, over the years, the ambition stayed while the kindness faded around the edges. Then there was his wife, Vanessa. Vanessa entered our family like a perfectly rehearsed performance. Beautiful smile, soft voice, expensive perfume. She knew exactly how to make people feel important. At first I liked her. Most people did. But something about her eyes bothered me. She watched people too carefully. Not in a warm way. In a calculating way. Still, Daniel loved her. That mattered to me. After their wedding, I tried to support them however I could. When Daniel's architecture business struggled during the recession, I loaned him money. When Vanessa wanted to launch an interior design company, I invested quietly without asking for repayment. I told myself that helping family wasn't charity. It was responsibility. 3 years ago, they found a beautiful modern home outside the city. Glass walls, wide staircase, expensive kitchen, landscaped backyard. Way beyond what they could realistically afford. Daniel sat across from me one evening, nervous fingers tapping against his coffee mug. "Dad," he said carefully, "we have a chance to finally build something stable." I already knew what was coming. The bank had rejected their mortgage twice. Vanessa didn't speak much during that conversation. She just watched me with those unreadable eyes while Daniel explained interest rates, market timing, investment opportunities. Finally he said it. "We need help." I missed Eleanor terribly in that moment because she would have known what to say. Instead, I opened my savings account. The money I had built over decades. The money Eleanor and I planned to travel with before cancer stole that future from us. I paid for the house in full. Not a loan. Not shared ownership. My money. My name remained on the property documents because my attorney insisted it was safer that way until Daniel stabilized financially. At the time, nobody objected. Vanessa even hugged me. "You're saving this family," she whispered. I remember feeling proud. I should have been careful instead. For a while things felt normal. Daniel and Vanessa invited me for Sunday dinners. My grandchildren, Noah and Lily, ran through the house laughing while Vanessa complained playfully about fingerprints on her furniture. Those kids were the brightest part of my life after Eleanor died. Noah loved hearing stories about my investigations. Lily always sat beside me during movies and fell asleep on my shoulder. That house slowly became the center of our family. Or at least I thought it did. But small things began changing over time. Vanessa started correcting Daniel in front of guests. Little humiliations disguised as jokes. "Oh honey, let your father talk. You know numbers confuse you." People laughed awkwardly. Daniel laughed too. Then she began making comments about my age. "You shouldn't drive at night anymore." Maybe Richard forgot already. "Careful, old people fall easily." Each sentence sounded harmless. As the evening continued, Vanessa became louder with every drink. She floated through conversations like the queen of the house, bragging about renovations, investments, vacations. "Our hard work finally paid off," she announced repeatedly. Around 9 o'clock, everyone gathered near the dining area while Vanessa gave a toast. Candles flickered against the glass walls behind her. Rain tapped softly outside. She raised her champagne glass dramatically. "To success," she smiled. Everyone echoed the toast. "To building a beautiful life without depending on anyone." That line caught my attention. Then she looked directly at me. "You know," she laughed, "people who sit around after retirement should really appreciate hard-working families who keep things running." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Daniel whispered, "Vanessa?" But she continued, "Honestly, I don't know what I'd do if I spent my days being useless." Silence spread slowly across the room. I felt every eye turn toward me. My chest tightened. Not from anger at first. From humiliation. After everything I had done for them, she chose to embarrass me publicly inside the house I purchased. Then came the sentence I'll never forget. Some people live off others their entire lives and still expect respect. Daniel finally stood up. That's enough. But Vanessa laughed again. Oh, relax. We all know your father contributes absolutely nothing here. That's when I realized something important. She truly believed the house belonged to her. Not legally. Emotionally. Completely. And judging from Daniel's expression, he knew exactly how dangerous this moment had become. I set my drink down carefully. Years ago, during investigations, I learned never to react emotionally when someone reveals their true character. Anger clouds observation. So I simply asked, Vanessa, do you really believe that? She crossed her arms confidently. I know it. The room became painfully still. Rain hit harder against the windows. And in that moment I noticed something else. Daniel looked terrified. Not embarrassed. Terrified. That's when I realized there was far more happening beneath the surface than simple disrespect. Vanessa smirked while I grabbed my coat. Drive safe, she said coldly. At your age, roads can be dangerous. Daniel followed me outside into the rain. Dad, wait. Streetlights reflected across wet pavement while guests continued laughing faintly inside. What's going on? I asked quietly. He rubbed his face nervously. Nothing. Vanessa just drinks too much sometimes. No, I replied. Something's wrong. He looked toward the house before answering. I'll explain later. Then he walked back inside. That bothered me more than the insult itself. Daniel had always been weak during conflict, but that night felt different. Controlled. Fearful. The next morning I reviewed something I hadn't checked in nearly a year, the property documents. Everything appeared normal at first. Then I noticed a request filed 3 months earlier for ownership transfer consultation. Not completed. Just initiated. My stomach dropped. Someone had been exploring how to move the house entirely into Daniel and Vanessa's names. Without telling me. I called my attorney immediately. He confirmed nobody could legally transfer ownership without my authorization. But he also mentioned something unsettling. There have been repeated inquiries from someone claiming to represent your family. Something wasn't right. That afternoon I drove past the house unexpectedly. A black SUV sat in the driveway. Inside, through the large front windows, I saw Vanessa speaking with a man in a gray suit. Papers covered the dining table. When Vanessa noticed my car outside, she quickly closed the curtains. That's when I realized this wasn't about disrespect anymore. It was about control. And I should have seen it earlier. Over the next week, things became stranger. Daniel stopped answering my calls consistently. When he did speak, he sounded exhausted and distracted. Meanwhile, Vanessa suddenly became overly polite through text messages. Hope you're feeling okay. Sorry if the party upset you. Fake concern. Manufactured softness. The kind people use when they know they crossed a dangerous line. Then Noah called me one evening. Grandpa, he whispered, Mom says you might move away soon. Is that true? My heart sank. Who told you that? She said old people need special homes sometimes. I gripped the phone tighter. Noah, listened carefully. I'm not going anywhere. But after hanging up, I sat alone in silence for a long time. Because now children were being used in whatever game Vanessa was playing. 2 days later, my attorney called again. Richard, someone attempted to access copies of your medical records. That chilled me instantly. Fraud investigators develop instincts over decades. Mine screamed immediately. They were building a narrative. Old age. Retirement. Possible mental decline. I had seen families do this before, slowly positioning elderly relatives as incapable to gain financial control. Except this time I was the target. That night, Daniel finally came to see me alone. He looked terrible. Pale. Unshaven. Nervous. She wants the house, he admitted quietly. I stared at him. How long has this been happening? He sat heavily on the couch. Almost a year. The room suddenly felt colder. She thinks your age makes things uncertain, he continued. She wants security. Security? I snapped. I paid for that house. I know. Then why are lawyers involved? Daniel buried his face in his hands. Because Vanessa believes eventually the property should legally become ours. Eventually. The word echoed in my head. Not after my death. Not through inheritance. No. And the worst part? Daniel hadn't stopped her. 3 nights later, everything exploded. At 11:30 p.m., someone pounded aggressively on my front door. When I opened it, Daniel stumbled inside soaked from rain, breathing heavily. She filed paperwork, he said. What paperwork? He looked terrified. She's trying to prove you're mentally unfit. For a moment, I genuinely couldn't speak. Then years of investigative instinct took over. How? She contacted a lawyer through one of her clients. She's claiming your memory has declined. Mood swings. Confusion. Financial instability. I almost laughed from disbelief. The irony was unbelievable. I had spent decades exposing financial predators. Now one was sitting at my family dinner table. She thinks if the court questions your competency, Daniel whispered, control of the property could shift temporarily while things are reviewed. That's when the full picture finally became clear. The insults. The comments about age. The fake concern. The medical record inquiries. It had all been preparation. A calculated strategy. And suddenly I remembered something Eleanor once told me after meeting Vanessa for the first time. She smiles with her mouth, not her eyes. I should have listened. Daniel paced across the living room anxiously. She didn't tell me everything at first, he admitted. I thought she just wanted financial planning. But then she started talking about conservatorship. My anger sharpened instantly. Did you sign anything? No. Did you support this? He hesitated too long. That hesitation hurt more than the betrayal itself. You let this happen, I said quietly. Tears formed in his eyes. She kept saying we deserved stability, that you'd eventually leave the house to us anyway. And you believed her? No, he whispered. I believed losing her would destroy the kids. There it was. Fear. Vanessa wasn't just manipulating property. She was controlling my son emotionally. Then Daniel handed me a folder. Inside were copied emails, legal consultations, drafts discussing my declining condition, statements from Vanessa describing me as forgetful and emotionally unstable. One sentence made my blood run cold. Richard Hale is increasingly incapable of independent financial judgment. She was building a legal attack using lies. But she made one fatal mistake. She underestimated who I used to be. The next morning, I contacted former colleagues from the Attorney General's office. Within hours, we started tracing Vanessa's recent financial activity. What we found shocked even me. Her interior design business was drowning in hidden debt. Credit cards maxed out. Private loans unpaid. Luxury purchases far beyond their income. Then came the real bombshell. Vanessa had secretly taken out a second mortgage application against the property months earlier using forged supporting documents claiming partial ownership rights through marital residence claims. It failed because my name alone remained primary on the deed. But she had tried. She intended to leverage the house financially without my knowledge. That wasn't desperation anymore. That was fraud. Suddenly every piece connected perfectly. The pressure. The manipulation. The attempt to establish my incompetence. If she could weaken my legal standing, she could eventually gain control of the property. And possibly sell it. I sat in my office staring at the evidence while rain rolled down the windows. Part of me felt furious. But another part felt devastated. Because this woman had eaten at my table for years. Held my grandchildren while planning to erase me from my own home. Then came the final twist. One of my former colleagues uncovered recorded complaints filed quietly against Vanessa by two previous business partners. Both accused her of financial manipulation. One even alleged forged signatures during a real estate transaction. No criminal charges stuck due to lack of proof. But patterns matter. And predators rarely change methods. That's when I realized something terrifying. I wasn't her first target. I was simply the biggest one. Over the next several days, I documented everything carefully. Emails. Property records. Financial applications. False competency claims. My attorney assembled evidence while former investigative contacts verified timelines and signatures. Daniel finally cooperated fully, providing text messages where Vanessa discussed positioning the property before Richard declines further. Those words disgusted me. Meanwhile, Vanessa had no idea we knew the full extent of her actions. She still believed I was confused, weak, easy to pressure. And that arrogance became her downfall. The confrontation happened during a family meeting Vanessa requested herself. She walked into my house confidently wearing a cream-colored coat, carrying legal documents under one arm. Daniel sat beside her silently. My attorney sat across from them. Vanessa's smile faded immediately. "What is this?" she asked. I slid the folder toward her. Inside were copies of the fraudulent mortgage attempts, financial records, debt reports, and her own emails discussing my supposed incompetence. For the first time since I met her, she looked genuinely afraid. "You investigated me?" she whispered. "No," I replied calmly. "I protected myself." Daniel finally spoke. "You lied to all of us." Vanessa turned toward him sharply. "I was protecting our future." "By stealing from my father?" Her composure cracked instantly. You think your father cares about you? She snapped. He controlled everything. I leaned forward slowly. I gave you everything willingly. You just couldn't tolerate waiting for more. Silence filled the room. Then my attorney delivered the final blow. Due to documented fraud attempts and false competency filings, we were pursuing legal action and immediate removal from any property-related claims. Vanessa's face went pale. The power she thought she held vanished completely in less than 5 minutes. The legal process moved quickly after that. Because Vanessa's mortgage applications included questionable documentation, investigators opened a formal fraud inquiry. Her business reputation collapsed almost overnight once lenders became aware of the investigation. Daniel filed for separation 3 months later. It wasn't dramatic, just sad. The children stayed primarily with him, and slowly, painfully, he began rebuilding trust with me. That took time. Real trust always does. As for the house, I sold it eventually. Not out of bitterness, out of necessity. Too many memories inside those walls had become poisoned. I used part of the money to establish college funds for Noah and Lily that nobody could touch except them. Vanessa fought aggressively during the divorce at first, but the evidence against her weakened every demand she made. In the end, she walked away with very little. Exactly as she should have. These days, my life is quieter again. But not lonely. Daniel visits often with the children. Sometimes we cook dinner together the way Eleanor used to. Noah still asks about my old investigations, and Lily still falls asleep during movies beside me. Some wounds never disappear completely. Betrayal from strangers is painful. Betrayal from family changes something deeper inside you. Still, I learned an important truth through all of this. Kindness should never require surrendering your dignity. I loved my family enough to help them build a home. But love without boundaries invites destruction. And sometimes the people who call you weak have absolutely no idea how strong you really are. The night Vanessa called me useless, she thought she was humiliating an old man. What she actually did was awaken the investigator she never should have challenged.